With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. 10 people were injured too critically when a 35-year-old man allegedly shouted Allahu Akbar and drove into pedestrians and a cyclist on the Ile de Lyon, France. Among the victims is a political aide from Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party, airlifted to hospital in critical condition. Police arrested the suspect, known for minor crimes and drug use, and opened an attempted murder case while probing possible terrorist motives. Gas cylinders were found in the torched vehicle, suggesting a failed explosion attempt. Interior Minister officials said counter-terror police have not yet taken over the case. Politicians, including Jordan Bardella and Eric Zemmour, condemned the attack as proof that Islamist violence now reaches even rural deep France. Democrats scored big wins in blue state races, with Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill taking gubernatorial contests by double digits. In New York City, high turnout delivered a historic result as progressive Zoran Mandani defeated Andrew Cuomo with more than 2 million ballots cast, the first time since 1969. Voters cited affordability and prices as key concerns.
If anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
British police have launched another manhunt after a 24-year-old Algerian sex offender was mistakenly released from HMP Wandsworth, further embarrassing the Labour government. The case follows the recent wrongful release of Ethiopian migrant Hadusha Kabatu, convicted of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl outside an asylum hotel. Kabatu's release triggered nationwide protests before he was rearrested and deported with £500 in government funds. The new heir came to light nearly a week after the Algerian's release, raising questions over delays in police notification. Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy has ordered a review amid revelations that 262 prisoners were mistakenly freed between March of 2024 and March of 2025. Several German events are canceled amid terror risk concerns and rising security costs. Overross Christmas market was scrapped after organizers said they couldn't fund measures like added guards and anti-vehicle barriers. Kirpin's market was also canceled. Bonn's Kessenich Autumn Festival shut down, citing the inability to meet current security requirements. Organizers said requests for city funding fell short. The heightened caution follows deadly attacks at public festivals, including Berlin's 2016 Christmas market truck attack, 2024 Magdeburg incident, plus a Solingen stabbing spree. Officials say operating without robust protections against threats such as uncontrolled vehicles is not an option. A convicted pedophile wanted by German authorities, Isaldan Suleiman, was arrested at the taxpayer-funded Britannia Ashley Hotel in Hale, which is used to house asylum seekers. The National Crime Agency detained him for extradition to Germany over child sex offenses. Outraged local MP Connor Rand criticized the government for placing Suleiman in a migrant hotel and demanded his swift deportation. Shadow Defense Secretary James Cartledge asked David Lammy a third time if he can confirm that no other asylum-seeking offenders have been freed.
Out of prison. It's a clear question. Can he give an answer?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Get a grip, man. I know I'm the Justice Secretary. That's why I'm at the dispatch box, also as Deputy Prime Minister. We know that. I'm not going to pray an aid. Dame Anne Owens is a former Deputy Commissioner in London, head of the NCA. It is for her to get to the bottom of that work. Of course, we know that there have been spikes since 2021 under his watch. When did he come to this house and apologise?
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome. Thanks for your company again. This is the Protagonists on the World Today. We have some fantastic guests too. One will be joining us partway through the whole program. We're talking about the Palestinian Revolution. Is it over, or is it the beginning? The world is holding its breath on Gaza, the virtues signalling West remains silent, while the perpetrators of genocide and torture go unpunished and a new normal takes place. Will the Trump peace plan become a reality, and are the benefits stacked in favour of the ruling parties and private interest? What will the Palestinians get? The right to live under the governance of others, albeit with the absence of terror and daily gunfire. Having stopped the killing temporarily, should the peace plan be given a good chance, or is it so fundamentally flawed it should not get that chance, and we should go back to the drawing board and make sure the senseless killing and the genocide is stopped? The time is right now. It's right now the time is for bold action to right some of the wrongs of the past. What can be done, and who would lead this? We've had suggestions that Tony Blair might. Heaven would truly, I don't know which is worse, eating glass or having Tony Blair be the governor. Could another peace plan win acceptance? Maybe we could include the Palestinians in the decision making this time. And that's something the Palestinians could own. Should Netanyahu Bibi be banished and Israel forced to dismantle its apartheid state and also its expansionist ambitions in the Middle East? It wants to be the ruling nation of the entire universe, backed up by its serf Donald Trump. Does the UN have the gonads, the ability and credibility to enact its resolutions? Most likely not. But it is worth finding an alternative path to peace. And I think that's an important thing, that we actually need peace. Now, we've got a smaller panel just for the next 10 minutes or so. We have some very good friends of the Pulse, the TNT, and also the World Today. And the first one I have to make mention is Frank Romano, Dr. Frank Romano. Frank, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Mike. Glad to be back.
And also Adel Darwish, thank you for joining us too. We need your microphone on. If you could just turn Adel, if you could just turn the microphone on, it helps. We need to hear your voice, sir.
Yes, good morning. Sorry about that. Sorry, I'm from the age of typewriter and telex, and before even inventing the fax. Sorry about that.
If you're still very young, I can see you about to head off to the gym to watch people work out. Maybe that's a good idea.
Heading to Parliament soon.
Yes, and we have also another guest, Alfred de Zayas, who will be joining us shortly too. He's just running a bit late. Frank, you're an author and a Middle East analyst. Just quickly, your thoughts on the ceasefire at the moment.
Well, the ceasefire, it's not much of a ceasefire since Israel has continued attacking some spots in Gaza. However, the plan is deeply flawed, and the basic flaw is, Mike, that Hamas is not involved. I mean, if we just make an analogy, I know the situations are different between the peace process in Ireland and the peace process in Palestine, but Sinn Féin and other militant groups were part of the negotiation through every step. And finally, Sinn Féin was able to agree to lay down arms and integrate into the political system. There's no leeway here for Hamas. Hamas is simply, écarted, set aside from all the decision making, which is a real problem, because it has shown good faith in wanting to compromise with Israel. In other words, it's compromising in handing over hostages and bodies of hostages, just as Israel is handing over Palestinian hostages and bodies of hostages. But it's showing good faith in wanting to take steps toward peace. And I don't think Netanyahu really is meeting them halfway. And also, the next flaw is having Tony Blair as head of the JITA, which is the Gaza International Transitional Authority. You know, with his terrible track record with the quartet, I think it was 2007, 2015, where he completely failed with respect to Palestine. I think it's good to have someone with authority who has a better track record. I think he has very little faith, as well as misleading the British people when he was prime minister, makes him lose credibility and not really the good person for the post as being director of the JITA.
Adel Darwish, you're a British commentator, historian, author, and Westminster Parliament reporter. What's your thoughts on the peace plan, or the temporary, the ceasefire and the peace plan at the moment?
Well, the ceasefire is actually one step of the peace plan. It's not a comprehensive whole. Obviously, Dr. Sorry, I was going to use Christian name. So Frank made sort of more comprehensive sort of analysis. I mean, just one step at a time. So it's first to stop the bloodshed and the killing. The second point is it's not actually the world we would like to see. Is we're dealing with the world as it is now. I mean, there are 2 or 3 issues actually here as why Hamas is not involved. In the situation of Ireland, the IRA, and many other situations when terrorist groups decided to throw away arms and come into a negotiating table, there was an end game. There was an aim at which it would stop the armed struggle. The IRA wanted to kick the British out and wanted to have semi-independent Northern Ireland with the final aim of joining the Republic. We don't know what Hamas endgame is because it's an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood who wanted a world Muslim caliphate, who wanted destruction of Israel. So we don't really know what the final aim is. That actually would stop it being in the negotiating table. The second reality is the Gulf states, the Arab states who will actually pay for the construction of Gaza, who can put pressure on the leaders of Palestinians, who really would waive the checkbook, and also Egypt and Jordan, that's a third issue, who really have peace with Israel and can step in. They don't want Hamas. They just do not want them there because of what the Muslim Brotherhood is doing in their own country. So the realities here are that nobody wants Hamas, not even Mahmoud Abbas and Palestinian Authority. The third aspect is we might have a negative view of Tony Blair in the liberal West on the way the last war in Iraq, public Saddam Hussein was conducted, etc., etc. But the reality is, Tony Blair has got the experience. He can pick the phone and speak to everyone involved with ease, which not many other negotiators really can do that. So I'm talking now all of that only about Gaza and ceasefire. I think the actual peace plan that Frank was talking about is a very long aim, and I recall, because I met these people over the last 50 years. I know them personally. I remember a conversation with Philip Habib, who was in the 1980s envoy of Henry Kissinger in the region, and he told me there are, at the world stand now, there are some problems unsolvable, and what we always aim is to try to prolong the ceasefire or prolong the quiet on the front between 2 conflicts. And unfortunately, until this view in the United States of America changes, then the long-term peace plan will be difficult. Now, this view changed in America with the President Trump, who wanted to have a deal, who wanted to actually get on with the deal. So that's actually a new reality that we should use this moment. The final point is the 7th of October 2023 has totally killed the idea of the 2-state solution in the mind of many liberal Israelis who really would rely on to put pressure on lunatics like Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition and replace them with some kind of a more moderate.
And we're joined also by Professor Alfred de Zayas, a dear friend of us here. We're just the question I posed to Frank and also to Adel. Your thoughts on the ceasefire at the moment, and if there is a ceasefire, but the perceived ceasefire at the moment, and also the Trump peace plan. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've written extensively about it already and published in various journals. My colleagues at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, my successor as independent expert on international order, Professor Georgios Katrogalos, the Special Rapporteur on Palestine, Francesca Albanese, the former Special Rapporteur on Palestine, Richard Falk, have all criticized the plan because it is an attempt to circumvent what already exists. That is, the highest judicial instance of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, has pronounced itself in 3 separate advisory opinions. It is currently seized with 2 contentious cases against Israel. We're dealing here with the situation of a genocide that must stop. And the Trump plan basically is complicity in this genocide. It has enabled the continuation of the shelling and killing of Palestinians. Basically, my first reaction when this came out is this is a non-starter. And I was very pleased to see 30 or so rapporteurs of the United Nations rejecting it. I mean, the only way forward is implementing international law and not trying to circumvent international law. I don't like Hamas any more than you do, but Hamas has not committed genocide, whereas Palestine, whereas Mr. Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, who is currently under an arrest warrant of the International Criminal Court, these people have committed the ultimate crime. Problem is that the mainstream media whitewashes them, and the mainstream media accepts what I hear to my surprise that a British commentator accepts that Tony Blair, this arch criminal, could play any role whatever. This man has zero credibility. So this man is a war criminal. This man bears a huge responsibility for the deaths of nearly 1 million Iraqis in a war that was totally contrary to the United Nations, contrary to the UN Charter. So, I mean, don't try to create a parallel world. I mean, we have international law, and Donald Trump has violated more fundamental principles of international law and more articles, treaties that I can think of. And so, as I say, what bothers me is this atmosphere of resignation that this is the best that you can get. No, this is not the best that you can get. I mean, the best that you can get is implementation of law. And the law is there, and it is clear. And I hope that the International Court of Justice will finally come out with its judgment on South Africa against Israel early next year, 2026. On the other hand, even the International Court of Justice is under massive pressure by the United States. and they caved in this year when they granted Israel an extension to make a further memorial on the case South Africa against Israel, so that the genocide could go on. Instead of saying this is a matter of highest urgency and we're coming down with our judgment now. And in any event, what do I think is the way forward? The way forward is to break all commercial relations with Israel, to completely isolate Israel, and to vindicate international law. I mean, Tony Blair, back in 2003, together with another arch criminal called George W. Bush, did their level best to make the United Nations irrelevant. Well, I remind you that Article 103 of the UN Charter, and the UN Charter is the best we have as a world constitution. Article 103 of the Charter says that all treaties, all agreements must be consistent, must be conform with the United Nations Charter, and any kind of a conflict between agreements or treaties or peace proposals, they must make to conform with the United Nations Charter. And obviously, this agreement, this so-called peace agreement, is not in conformity. As a matter of fact, ignores the United Nations Charter, ignores hundreds of resolutions of the General Assembly, hundreds of resolutions. No, it would be nice if we had hundreds of resolutions of the Security Council, but we do have several resolutions of the Security Council which Israel has violated with the complicity of the United States, with the complicity of the European countries. We here in the Geneva International Peace Research Institute, we have submitted not one but two cases, legal briefs, 32 pages to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court against the European Commission, against Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas for complicity by providing military, political, economic, diplomatic, and propagandistic support to a genocidal state. I mean, read the last report submitted to the Human Rights Council on the 16th of September of this year, the report submitted by the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, the 72-page report concluding that genocide has been committed and is being committed in Israel, and that Israel must stop that. But of course, as long as we tolerate people like Tony Blair, as long as we tolerate people like Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is received in Washington in the Oval Office and speaks before the Congress, and as long as Netanyahu is received also in Hungary and speaks with Viktor Orban, we got a problem of credibility. We have zero credibility in the West. We are complicit in the genocide, and I don't want to see it whitewashed. I don't want to see it reduced. A collective of lawyers, international lawyers in France, have just submitted a case against Emmanuel Macron for complicity in the genocide. A collective of lawyers have done the same thing with regard to Meloni, Italy, and another collective is doing the same thing with regard to Friedrich Merz. That is international law. That is the way to go. I mean, we're not going to say that 75 years of United Nations resolutions and 75 years of pronouncements of the General Assembly and the Security Council are meaningless, and we're going to accept this fraud of a peace plan proposed by Trump, and we're going to just throw the United Nations in the bin. We are totally irrelevant. Okay, if that's the way you want it, then we're back to the law of the jungle. I
Yes.
mean,
Now, we
civilization spent centuries trying to develop the rule of law, spent centuries trying to develop a system. And unfortunately, this system has been hijacked. This system has been subverted. This system has been penetrated. But even Amnesty International and even the Human Rights Watch organization have strongly condemned the genocide. And this kind of peace plan by Trump basically condones it. And so, what we say is we applaud the return of the last living hostages. We applaud the liberation of political prisoners by Israel. We applaud the partial ceasefire. It is tragic that 70,000 people have lost their lives in this genocidal campaign. That is all to be welcomed, but we should not, under any condition, accept a peace plan that simply makes the United Nations and international law irrelevant.
Look, Professor, we just have to, we've got a limited time here, so I don't mean to be rude by any stretch of the imagination. Frank, how does the peace plan allow Palestinians to govern in their own interest?
Yes, Alfred de Zayas makes a good point.
Yes.
Bringing the Palestinians in, even though, of course, as Sinn Féin in Ireland, they're considered a terrorist group. But as Mr. Zayas says, some members of Hamas had committed war crimes. It's true, and they were up for war crimes. And those defendants have died, but the main actors in this 20-point plan are all war criminals. Tony Blair, Mr. Trump, in particular. It's almost like having the wolves take care of protect the hens in the hen house, and then Kirshner, who used to work and he's working now with the Trump administration Middle East affairs, is an entrepreneur who definitely has a conflict of interest in the land in Gaza, and he also seems to talk with Mr. Trump a lot about transforming Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. We don't have, as Mr. Zayas says, they do not have none of these potential participants in the Gaza International Transitional Association or have credibility. And so therefore, it's almost like it's set up for failure. And of course, Netanyahu accused of war crimes, as far as I mentioned to you, Mike, and you know this, and to Mr. Zayas, and that I am one of the original lawyers who filed the complaint against Netanyahu, this time against Lieberman and American President Obama and President Trump in his former administration for war crimes. Know very well what has been done to make the accusation that these people have committed war crimes. So bringing back to your question, really, Mike, about not involving Palestinians, even though, as Mr. Zayas says, yes, Hamas considered a terrorist group, and also and perhaps connected with the Islam Brotherhood or not. But let's look at what's happening on the ground today. And if they are willing, Hamas is willing to compromise and to set forth what it can in good faith. Again, the heads of Hamas have not been accused or convicted of war crimes. The former heads, Haniyeh and others, have passed away. Then let them proceed with this type of compromise that they could make with the Gaza International Transitional Authority. and be part of this authority to share this. It would be far more realistic to bring in the Palestinians, in particular Hamas, more so than the PA. And I know about the PA from Ramallah really work together. It's almost like having another Israeli agent involved if you have Mahmoud Abbas involved. It really does not, according to the Palestinian people, as representative of the Palestinian people at this point, but most Palestinians, as in Gaza and in the West Bank, if you talk with them personally, and I am on the phone every day with people from Gaza and the West Bank, say we really want to have a normal peace. They don't necessarily, as the propaganda leads us to believe, that they don't necessarily just want a Palestinian state at the exclusion of an Israeli state. That is really many Palestinians, to get beyond all the politics and the propaganda, really want a normal life, would like to work together, give in good faith this opportunity for Palestinians to be part of this peace process. Again, the way it's set up with Netanyahu involved, President Trump, and Tony Blair with their track records, it is a set up for failure, and they don't have credibility. And Mr. Zayas is absolutely right. We need to have strong leaders with credibility that can push this forward without these black back records, and not simply exclude Hamas from negotiations without thinking this through and without even considering the fact that they have led us to believe that they're willing to compromise.
Yeah, Adel, what do you think?
Well, there's quite a lot to cover. I agree with the Professor Zayas that, of course, that legal matters. I'm not an international lawyer, I'm a historian. International law codifies what we need as political outcome. But you need political compromise to implement international law. And as I said, I have met all these people over the last 50 years. I recall once what the late Yitzhak Rabin said. Yitzhak Rabin was the most intellectually honest leader in Israel I have come across through almost 50 years of covering this tragic conflict. He once said that in Rabat, and once again repeated it to me in Jerusalem, that he wants to give, that he came round to be convinced that you cannot actually have a settlement and peace without giving the Palestinians their rights. Unfortunately, 2 days ago would be the 30th anniversary of Rabin's assassination by a right-wing extremist nationalist settler or settlers movement there. And until we actually have another Rabin there, then it will be very difficult. Now, how can we get another Rabin there? What the countries around Israel, and I'm afraid I have to disagree that Hamas showing goodwill. Hamas did not actually come with a statement like the PLO in 1988, renouncing violence and recognizing Israel to exist. Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, do not recognize Israel's right to exist. I'll come around this to this in a minute. The people in the neighboring countries of Israel have not actually accepted or realized that Israel is a democracy. You have to have the numbers of voters to actually vote out Netanyahu and the lunatics in his government and get people to vote. I repeat again, 7th of October has actually not only 7th of October, the history itself have proven that. I explain why. Between 1948 and the Six-Day War, we had 19 years. Israel was not in Gaza. Gaza was administered by Egypt. Israel was not in the West Bank. West Bank was administered by Jordan. Had the Palestinians wished to have a state of their own, why they did not establish a state of their own? Because you had Kamal al-Nasser in Egypt, and you have the pressure internally in Jordan and in Syria and so on. They were not interested in implementing the United Nations Resolution 1947 by creating an independent Palestinian state, but the destruction of Israel by the slogan Liberation of Palestine. So that's actually history itself. Let's go to the second stage. I visited Arafat. I knew Arafat personally. I knew everyone personally in the region because I was a reporter in the region. I visited Arafat several times there. Gaza had its own airport. I went there in private jets there, negotiated with Arafat. I sat down with Arafat several times in Gaza. They had the opportunity there. They had their own airport with the coordinate. They had the opportunity. What they did, the corruption there, they created a culture of dependency in the world to finance Gaza through donation and through UNRWA and so on. And the money was siphoned with sort of became very rich, the PLO and Palestinian leaders. And at the end, Hamas had the coup and kicked them out. Israel actually withdrew, after Israel withdrew, rockets fired from it. Come to southern Lebanon. Israel withdrew from southern Lebanon. Rockets fired from southern Lebanon. And again, I repeat what happened with 7th of October. Therefore, there is accumulation of experience within the Israeli public psyche, within the Israeli voters' memory, that and the way the demographics are changing in Israel, and the right-wing religious people there, and those settlers, which actually the settlers' activities are actually criminal activities. Yes, I agree with that. But with the demographic changes in their favor, within 10 years, they will be the majority voters in Israel. Now, we have the Gulf states, and we have some seen trends within the Arab world, especially from the Gulf, saying, yes, chance now we can go and give them the gun. Unfortunately, it's actually become far removed dream because of the experience I'm talking about. And finally, we need to have a partner in Israel. How to create a partner in Israel? Again, increase. Now, if you take opinion polls in Israel, the people who actually want to put Netanyahu in jail, and he should have been in jail for breaking the Israeli law and trying to change the constitution and all of that. Even the people who agree with that, they support the war aims in Gaza because of what Hamas did in the 7th of October. So this is the reality we are facing with. And again, on Tony Blair, yes, but what is the mechanism? What is the reality of actually putting Netanyahu in jail, on putting Tony Blair in jail, as the professor wants to? Yes, this is the ideal world. We don't live in the ideal world. I wanted to elect Trump myself, but he presented something that managed to, for the first time, pressurize Israel, to stop the bloodshed, come up with a ceasefire. Let's build on what's there. But if everyone, public opinion, whether in the world or in the region or in Israel, keeps sort of undermining Tony Blair or undermining people who want to move forward, then we'll have no chance. We'll be back in square one. So what do we want? Do we want actually the war to continue, or build on what's going on now? And this is the reality as we face today. Again, my experience, and I also covered the Gulf wars as well. I've covered the Afghanistan war. Tony Blair might be in international court not the best person, but he has got the power, or the people in power who matter, the people who can finance the peace process matter, and the Israeli public opinion behind him. And that is really all credibility. Unless we change public opinion, Netanyahu and his lot would be re-elected once more, and that would be very, very bad news for peace.
Alfred, I saw you taking notes there, about to reply, as a good lawyer should, but do you agree with Adel that if Netanyahu is re-elected, it is a very bad thing? I think it's a terrible thing, but what's your thoughts, and how do, besides the notes you're taking, you're going to reply back, but also the thought of Netanyahu being re-elected? It's sort of it's almost obscene, isn't it?
Of course it's obscene. It's like saying, let's deal with Hitler and let's respect the will of the German people if Hitler is re-elected. Now, come on. I mean, Israel is not a democratic state. Israel has a press that is completely controlled. The Israeli public is subjected to daily brainwashing. And I know a lot of Israelis that complain about the fact that they have to read RT, they have to read Sputnik, they have to read other sources of information because the main, the Jerusalem Post, etc., are giving them lies day in and day out. Now, I am an international lawyer. I insist on international law having meaning. International law has meaning when it gets enforced. We have the highest judicial instance of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, that has pronounced itself again and again. They have the blueprint for peace. It's very extensive, very clear what has to be done in Gaza. Why is not being done? Because we have criminals in the White House. We have criminals in London, in Paris, and in Berlin. That is the problem. We have been thoroughly hijacked by so-called elites. But thank God, there are people who think differently. Mr. Darwish talks about realism. Well, I think that our greatest realist professor of international relations is John Mersheimer. And John Mersheimer at the University of Chicago has laid down point by point what to do about Gaza. The same thing, Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University. He is himself Jewish, and he says that Netanyahu has been the downfall of Israel, and Israel will never be able to survive the collective guilt that has been imposed on the Israeli people because of this ultimate crime of genocide. I find that the United Nations bears enormous responsibility because the United Nations created this monster called the State of Israel. At the time that it was accepted to membership in the United Nations in 1949, there were conditions. And the conditions were that it would respect its borders and not continually expand and engage in aggressions against all of its neighbors. It stayed in the resolution that Israel was a so-called peace-loving state, stays in the text of the resolution, and that it commits itself to implement all of the decisions and to work in cooperation with the United Nations. No country has violated more resolutions of the United Nations than Israel. And it's a question of perception. It's a question of public relations. There's a huge public relations selling you Tony Blair as somebody credible. But again, public relations can completely change perception and, of course, influence democratic decisions. Now, as a United Nations official that I was for decades, I am a believer in the importance of the trusteeship council. I think that Israel as a state is a failed state, and Israel must be, the whole thing must be looked again seriously. I would like to see the trusteeship council, which still exists, be reactivated, declare this entire area of Israel an international area, and that will be managed by the United Nations until there is peace, and it will be managed according to the judgments and the resolutions of the International Court of Justice. Otherwise, why do we have an International Court of Justice? Why do we have a system of law? You're going to take the whole law and just put it in the bin. And I mean, I am quite concerned about the erosion of the concept of the rule of law. We are tolerating not only half measures, we're tolerating the subversion of the very concept of legality. Now, there are good people. Here you have the late Jimmy Carter, whom I personally knew and respected. He wrote in 2006 a very good book, Palestine Peace, Not Apartheid. He also wrote in 2009 this very good book, We Can Have Peace in the Holy Land. That is a viable blueprint for peace. This, by the way, is another viable blueprint for peace. The one state solution by Professor Virginia Tilley. Now, if you don't want to have two states, okay, we will have a one state solution. You will bring back all of the millions of Palestinians who were expelled and live outside the borders of Palestine. You will have a state with a Palestinian majority, and Israel will have to abide by all the treaties that it has ratified, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the International Convention against racial discrimination, which it systematically violates. I mean, Israel is a terrorist state. Israel is a rogue state, and it is only the propaganda that we get in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in the Wall Street Journal, and CNN, even in BBC, that tries to tell us that it is the only democratic country in the Middle East. It is all propaganda. It is all public relations. And if we don't change our perception, the whole world is going to be blown up sooner or later. So we have to go back and agree there is one common denominator. The common denominator is the United Nations Charter. The United Nations Charter has the supremacy clause, Article 103, and we will have to live according to the this World Constitution. And as I said, revive the Trusteeship Council and reorganize Israel. I mean, this is the moment to do so. I mean, if the Commission of Genocide is not enough to say we have to go back to square one, because this Zionist project, this European colonization in the midst of the Muslim world was a bad idea from day one. And the only reason why this occurred is this enormous sympathy, and I share that sympathy because I've known a lot of Holocaust survivors. After the Holocaust, you wanted to do something for the Palestinians, for the Israelis, but you cannot do it at the expense of the Palestinians. That is what concerns me. I mean, the Palestinians are not guilty of what Nazis did, what Europeans did to European Jews. And that's also another thing. The Zionists, 90% of the Zionists, 90% of the Israelis are not Semites, are not from this part of the world. They're all Europeans. Netanyahu has Polish roots. The others have Russian, Ukrainian, Lithuanian, Estonian roots. They are Europeans. They're colonizers, exactly as the European colonizers in South Africa that thought they could go in there, take all the land, take all the water, take everything that's valuable for us. Who cares? These Palestinians, they're Untermenschen, as the Nazis would say.
Now, I don't wish to, again, I'm not trying to cut anybody short. We do have a little bit of time, and I'll be here till midnight, our time, if we keep going. But by the way, the conversation, the information is just brilliant. Frank, can you just tell me, if we're looking at the peace plan, Donald Trump's peace plan, two questions I have for you. And if we all can just keep it a bit briefer to about 3 or 4 minutes, that would be great. Thanks, if you wouldn't mind. How does a peace plan allow Palestinians to govern in their own interest? And who will pay for it? And what about the reconstruction of Gaza? Who is going to dictate on how that should look?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to just make a quick comment about what Alfred has said. According to the peace plan, if we were to shift a bit of that peace plan and allow Palestinians to be part of the Gaza International Transitional Association, then we can then find the funding. If we allow them to be a part of it, they're not going to dominate it. They'll just be a part of this. And since they seem to have credibility, as Alfred has said, they have not committed war crimes in this whole mess, where all the other actors that have been suggested by Mr. Trump have. That would give them a say, a partial say, and then of course we'll have other actors a part of this group that would be governing this transitional process. Now, the funding, of course, as Mr. Trump has suggested, there are several sources of funding, in particular some of the Gulf states that have a direct interest in trying to overcome, especially the countries like Bahrain, and even as far as we can talk about Morocco, which is outside the Gulf country, but that was part of the normalization process, the UAE and so forth, that could fund this to sort of overcome the fact that day before November 7th were normalizing, and then November 7th came and they pulled back from it. That is a suggestion that Mr. Trump made. But I want to just add quickly and give the place to other speakers. When Alfred said, however, international law needs to be respected, if you look at the 20-point plan, one of the most important parts of it was to bring in humanitarian aid. And it was said that at least 600 trucks need to come in. Talking about international law, the International Court of Justice in 2024, as part of that same case that South Africa brought for genocide against Israel that is still pending, it made a provisional measure which is binding, and that is the state of Israel cannot impede the flow of humanitarian aid in Gaza. So the compliance with the 20-point plan is pretty much out the door. Very few trucks, I think, maybe less than 100 were allowed in, far fewer than what's needed. And I guess, and then also, as I was on the Handala as well as the Global Sumud flotilla, we were legally bringing in humanitarian aid, and going through this blockade, which according to the provisional measure is illegal because it impedes the flow of humanitarian aid. So tying it all together, Mike, as far as financing this project, the 20-plan deal, and getting the Palestinians involved, I think the PA would not be the right solution because they have pretty well collaborated with Israel. Maybe a mixture of the PA and the Hamas together. But complying with international law is fundamental. And so far, with the continuing of breaking the ceasefire and not especially complying with bringing in humanitarian aid is in violation of that International Court of Justice decision, and also not even in compliance with the 20-point plan that Trump put forward.
Adel, the part of the problem, or indeed a great problem, because Alfred had some very good points, and says, and I agree with with what he's saying about the UN, but the UN is highly ineffective. Its inability to enforce its resolutions. I mean, it's just words. How do we fix that? And I know Alfred's going to want to come in a second, but Adel, if you could just, in your own opinion, how do we fix it? Because the UN is ineffective in many cases, especially this time.
Yes, it's ineffective, and I again here, how can we implement the international law, as the professor mentioned? If his start point is dismantling the state of Israel, he actually saying Israel independence was a mistake. I mean, Ben Gurion wanted to have one state for all, but then the Arabs rejected the partition plan of the two-state solution. And again, I repeat that again. It was Egypt and her Arab allies who actually broke the international law by launching a war to wipe Israel off the map. So how actually, if an international lawyer is saying that Israel is a mistake, shouldn't exist there, make argument about the demographics, although there's a lot of Sephardim and Mizrahi Jews who were actually expelled from Egypt and expelled from Arab countries, who actually, some live in Israel, some live in the diaspora. If actually you are telling public opinion, world public opinion, and telling Israeli public opinion you shouldn't exist, how can you actually implement international law? And again, I repeat it again, and I think I mentioned it on your program, or I can't remember if I mentioned it or not. Have we ever heard of Intifada in Jericho? Have we ever heard of trouble in Jericho? No. Why? Because they are joint Israeli and Palestinian ventures like casinos and hotels and so on, and both sides are benefiting from it. So it's again, and that's where the Trump plan might not be ideal, but at least if you are a commercial enterprise that benefits everyone, then there is a such starter from there. You can again, I keep repeating myself. The solution is seen by the Israeli public, who actually can vote a government that would compromise, accept peace, bring another rabbin in, and a coalition for peace. If, in their point of view, the United Nations is actually against Israel, for whatever reason it is. The professor kept repeating perception. The perception in public opinion in Israel is that the United Nations is against them. Not only created a culture of dependency on handouts in Gaza, especially in Gaza and the West Bank, but it also, some of its workers, whether it's true or not, the perception was actually committed the crimes of 7th of October 2023. There's no clear statement from the Islamic movement, the Hamas part of it, that actually accept Israel's right to exist, and so on. So if we're talking about perception, and again, like it or not, you might not accept it as a democracy, you might suggest that it is actually propaganda. Well, the reality is they elect the government. You have to give them the perception and the tool and the assurances that if they elect a government for peace, there is a partner for peace on the other side. Now, this is what I'm just sorry I keep repeating myself here, that I'm absolutely totally astounded by the professor actually claim that he wants Israel not to exist in its form. Now, the Arabs themselves, although they didn't accept the partition plan, they didn't give the Palestinian independent state when they had the chance to do so for 19 years. Colonel Nasser started in 1967 war. Apart from 1956, the Suez crisis, every single war was actually started by the Arabs and are a result of another war started by the Arabs. So let's actually get real there. We have to create a condition of electing a government in Israel that would accept the presence of a United Nations, would accept the trucks going in, and so on.
We are, excuse me, we are running out of time. Write a reply for Alfred, Professor Alfred de Zayas. And then I have a final question for everybody. I don't mind, by the way, going over, so I'm not going to put a dead stop on this conversation because it is important. And I think what we're doing is we're doing what they couldn't do for a long time, and that was talk and communicate and swap ideas. And all of you are highly credentialed, so I think you all have great points to make. Professor de Zayas, what would you say? And a write a reply to Adel. And do you think we will ever see peace in the Middle East, in particular with Israel involved?
Well, certainly not with Mr. Netanyahu. It's impossible to make peace with Netanyahu. Certainly not as long as Trump and Kushner and this crowd is in Washington. They don't want peace. They want to cement the apartheid state called Israel. Now, in my book, building a just world order. I have an entire chapter devoted to the right of self-determination, theory and practice, how to implement. But to implement international law, you need goodwill. And goodwill is a very rare commodity. Goodwill is not in Washington, London, Paris, or Berlin. Goodwill is in the BRICS countries. Goodwill is in the global majority, in the global south, and they should weigh in the peace in the Middle East. I endorse much of what Dr. Romano said. I have great problems with the narrative of Mr. Darwish because I think here fake news and fake history have flowed into fake law. And the fact is that Israel owes everything to the United Nations. It's not that the United Nations is against Israel. The United Nations made a gift to Israel to accept a colonial state in the midst of the Arab countries. And when I said now here fake news, I mean, it's been debunked many, many times that the war in 1967 was started by the Arabs. No, it wasn't. And the fact is that Israel has been an aggressor state since day one. And let's go back to the creation of Israel in 1947. First, the partition plan, and secondly, the murder by Zionist terrorists of the UN envoy Volker Bernadotte, and the blowing up of the King David Hotel by Zionist terrorists, etc. It was a terrorist state from day one. But again, the perception, the public relations, has sold us Israel in rose color, has sold us Israel as, shall we say, us, as the good guys. But this is a reversal of the roles of who is the perpetrator and who is the victim, who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. Now, the Palestinians have been there for millennia. And now Israel says the Palestinians don't exist. But they exist, the Europeans who came from Europe in the 1940s and 50s. Now, this is a rape of history. And by the way, I have a PhD in history, and I also teach history at university, not only international law. I go back to my demand that we revisit the creation of the state of Israel. And that's why I say in this context, because it failed, because the creation of the state of Israel only unleashed a series of wars against Lebanon and Jordan and Syria and Egypt and all of its neighbors, it was a failed state. It was a bad idea. So let's have the trusteeship council go back to the Palestine mandate, retake the Palestine mandate, and then have a one-state solution whereby the Palestinians will build the majority, and the Israelis will have to live together in peace, without apartheid, without humiliating the Palestinians on a daily basis, without destroying their orchards, without having settlers go into Palestinian villages and kill Palestinians. I mean, as I say, public relations, perception, we have been brainwashed into believing that Israel is the good guy, and that's why we accept it. That's how we, the masses in the United States or in Europe, accept Israel. But what an irony that a country that owes its existence to the Holocaust, a country that owes its existence to the Nazi genocide against the Jews, would now, 80 years later, be the principal genocide perpetrator in the world. Now, that should make you think. It should also make you think of General Assembly Resolution 3379 of the 10th of November, 1975. That was a resolution: Zionism is a form of racism. This is a resolution that was correct at the time because, in its very essence, Zionism is the idea of we Jews, a state only for the Jews and for nobody else. That's why apartheid is too soft a word to refer to Israel. And this resolution 3379 was removed almost fraudulently in 1991, 16 years later, when Israel was waving the olive branch and indicating that it was ready to accept the Palestinian state. That was just before the conference in Madrid. And what happened? Nothing. Things got even worse for the Palestinians. But of course, they got rid of Resolution 3379. So my proposal, let's revisit 3379 and make it stronger.
Yeah, we have run out of time, but what I'm going to do is just ask you. I need to because the whole conversation was what's going to happen basically in the future. I'll start with you, Frank, if you don't mind. What is needed for long-lasting peace in the region besides honesty, which obviously that part has been left out of the equation on many occasions?
Well, if we were able to, first of all, either the one state or the two state, but let's just say, let's try the two state for now. And there's either would be in Gaza or in the West Bank or connected the West Bank and Gaza to have the Palestinian state. If that were the case, then Hamas would have very little power because Hamas feeds on this conflict. If the Palestinians have their place, they have their country, then they're not going to be saying, we're being attacked now, and Hamas is not going to use that to recruit people to defend all of Palestine, whether it be Gaza or even the West Bank, because Hamas is involved in the West Bank as well. And the contrary is also true, Mike. If, for instance, Israel will have its state, I would say it was the state of Israel, not a Jewish state, because you've got 20% non-Jews living in Israel, but Israelis have their state. Then the far right, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, would have far less leverage because they do the same thing. They say, we need to be in power because we are defending Israel. We're defending the Jews against anti-Semites, in particular Hamas, from attacking us. If Jews have their own state and the Palestinians have their own state, these two extremist groups will have far less power. And it will usher in the possibility in Palestine, for instance, other political groups that would be more liberal. I wouldn't say the PA, but more representative groups of the Palestinian people, because they have their own state. And the contrary, the Israelis, once they have their own state and it's defined and the Palestinians have their state, then this new generation will usher in a whole new group of people, because Netanyahu, as well as Smotrich and Ben Gvir, feed on conflict. And they say, we're the ones that need to be elected. The Likud party needs to be elected because we're the only ones that defend the Israeli people. Be careful. And they pull the chain of conflict and they get elected. And so I believe that is one solution and would also temper the leverage of these extremist groups if we have a Palestinian state and an Israeli state.
Thank you for that, Frank. Adel, what is needed for long-lasting peace in the region?
Well, I actually agree with Frank here that if you remove the excuse of conflict from the ideology of conflicts like Hamas or like the extreme right-wing trend in Israel, that would be a possibility. Yes, I agree there. However, how to create these conditions? Again, here, if we actually hear a former official of the United Nations and respected international lawyer saying, let's revisit the creation of Israel, Israel shouldn't exist, and so on, then there'll be a problem here with the convincing the Israeli public opinion to elect a partner for peace, because the electoral system in Israel is not like we have here in Britain. You don't have a clear government and opposition sitting opposite side in parliament. It's always a coalition there. So without actually creating this condition there, because if we go back to actually predating predating the Holocaust, I'm talking about 1936, I'm talking about 1929, when there were actually Jews who actually lived in the area. It was an Ottoman vilayat, then it became a mandate administered, and there were massacres by Muslims, Hajj Amin al-Husseini and so on, associated with the Muslim Brotherhood there. So that's actually a memory, you cannot take it from the people's mind there. You actually need to create this condition, create economic conditions that benefit both sides, and get Israeli public opinion enough. You're not going to convince everyone in this proportional representation system. You have to have enough weight of electorate who would believe in that, without actually hearing statements like, let's dismantle Israel, let's revisit the creation of Israel, and that should be also accepted in the countries that matter, Jordan and Egypt and Syria surrounding Israel. The Gulf states are pragmatic, they are trade people, they are coming from mentality like Trump's mentality. So they actually help creating the economic conditions that benefit both sides. But without that, I'm afraid I'm not very optimistic.
Thank you for that, Adel. Appreciate it. As our final comment from the panel, Professor Alfred de Zayas, can you just tell me what is needed to achieve
Truth, goodwill, good faith, honesty, and it's all missing. We still live in a world of cognitive dissonance. We are expected to believe narratives and myths about the state of Israel. And some of my colleagues are accused of being anti-Semites because they say obvious things like the Balfour Declaration being essentially an imperialist, colonialist idea, and the creation of an apartheid state in Israel being accepted and then being sold to everybody as a democratic country. Now, we have blueprints for peace, and already Jimmy Carter, in his book, We Can Have Peace in the Holy Land, if there had been any goodwill at the time and they had taken Jimmy Carter seriously, there would have been a chance for peace. I am not so sure of that. That is why I think that in the current situation, the Trusteeship Council should take responsibility for the area that used to be the Palestine mandate. And I recommend to our viewers to read Noam Chomsky's and Ilan Pappes' book, Gaza in Crisis, and for the analysis of the international law situation, the late Francis Boyle's book, Palestine, Palestinians, and International Law. I think the solution has to be based on international law. You cannot sidestep the International Court of Justice. You cannot sidestep the United Nations. As I said, the United Nations has the primary responsibility for the creation of the state of Israel. And one thing that I have said in some of my articles is that pursuant to Article 6 of the United Nations Charter, a state that systematically violates the UN Charter and systematically acts contrary to the purposes and principles of the organization can be expelled. That is, the General Assembly could do this, but my disappointment, being a realist and seeing who is running countries like, Sisi. You think Sisi is a credible person? Who is running the Arab world? Who is running Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, etc., etc.? It's not just a failure of the West. And of course, we are morally bankrupt in the West. It's not just the failure of Washington and London and Paris and Berlin. It is the failure of the organization of the Islamic Conference. It is the failure and the inaction of the Arab League on behalf of the Palestinians. The silence is deafening when it comes to the war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide committed by Israel against the Palestinians over 80 years now. And it's essentially been tolerated. Why? Because they're all making money, because they're all doing business. They are like Mr. Trump, transactional. They are business people. They just want to make money. As long as this is the mentality that governs, we're not going to have peace in Palestine. I would like to see now, I'm sure that it's a dream, and I'm sure that Jeffrey Sachs would call it a nightmare. I would say, let's have a United Nations administration in the territory of Palestine, and let us have Jeffrey Sachs, Professor Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University, a great American and a great Jew. Let's have him as the administrator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to say, much appreciated to Professor Alfred de Zayas, also to Adel Darwish and Dr. Frank Romano. You've all been very kind and you keep coming back to us. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. Just reminding, tomorrow night or tomorrow morning in the UK, we'll be looking at, I think, one of the great celebrity game show hosts of the future in the making, and that's Nigel Farage. Will he and Reform save the UK? And I hear some chuckling in the background, but true, that's what he should do. And I'm sure if we gave Alfred another 10 minutes, he'd also get into him also. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. If you want a bit of a chuckle tomorrow night, I'm sure it will be a bit of a chuckle, but it's also very serious, because tomorrow we're talking about I think it's an illusion. It's a smoke and mirrors. And I don't see any credible opposition at the moment in the UK. Not saying that Labor are any good. I think they're appalling. But you need good opposition and not a celebrity game show host. Thank you so much, gentlemen. This is The World Today, and this has been The Protagonist.